We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy. I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
I'm Ivan Watson in southern Ukraine, and this is CNN.
Hello and welcome. I'm Bianca Noblo in London, and this is the Global Brief. Right now, Taiwan is waking up for a day of controversial diplomacy after the U.S. House Speaker touched down on Tuesday evening. Then the U.S. says that the Taliban could face consequences for harboring the leader of al-Qaeda, who was killed over the weekend. And the Kremlin says, quote, megaphone diplomacy will not help Brittany Griner's prisoner exchange. We're live in Moscow. Defiant, divisive, and potentially dangerous, Nancy Pelosi has become the first U.S. House Speaker to visit Taiwan in 25 years. She arrived in Taipei Tuesday night in a show of diplomatic support for the self-governing island. The visit is not officially supported by President Joe Biden, who said publicly that the U.S. military didn't think it was a good idea for Pelosi to stop in Taipei during her Asia tour. For weeks, the Chinese government has said that it was ready to take, quote, resolute and forceful measures if Pelosi touched down in Taiwan, which China sees as a breakaway province. Now, the Chinese military says it's on high alert and will perform a series of, quote, targeted military operations, including joint air and sea drills around the island. But the U.S. National Security Council spokesman, John Kirby, said that there was no reason for this visit to erupt into conflict. Take a listen.
China has positioned itself to take further steps, and we expect that they will continue to react over a longer-term horizon. I couldn't give you a date certain of what that horizon looks like, but we certainly would expect them to react even beyond her trip. The United States will not seek and does not want a crisis. We are prepared to manage what Beijing chooses to do.
Meanwhile, in Taiwan's capital, the landmark Taipei Tower lit up to welcome Nancy Pelosi's arrival. But Mayor Ko Wen-ye is urging caution, saying that Taiwan should not be put, quote, in between a rock and a hard place. CNN's Will Ripley unfolds all the latest events for us.
A resounding show of American support for Taiwan in the face of escalating threats from China.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi landing in Taiwan Tuesday. A display of defiance, ignoring days of perilous warnings from China.
Minutes after Pelosi's arrival, China announced a series of targeted military operations in response to the House Speaker's visit. State media publishing a map of the drills, which began during the overnight hours, some just miles from the Taiwanese coast. As Pelosi's convoy arrived at her Taipei hotel, a heavy police presence. Two groups of protesters gathered outside. Some welcome Pelosi's support for Taiwan.
Speaker of House is Nancy Pelosi has been supporting Taiwan for decades, and it's very important for me as a Taiwanese to be here tonight to welcome her.
Others accuse her of escalating tensions.
Right now, Pelosi and the United States are treating Taiwan as a chess piece. Once she lands in Taiwan, mainland China will retaliate using their own methods.
China's foreign ministry spokesman calling Pelosi's stop in Taiwan a serious violation of the One China principle that will have a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations. Taiwan says cyber attacks knocked some government websites offline. No immediate claims of responsibility.
Beijing calls Taiwan a breakaway province of China. The mainland communist rulers have never controlled the island of almost 24 million people. They refuse to recognize Taiwan's democratically elected government. Taiwan says China sent more than 20 warplanes into the island's air defense zone Tuesday, part of what Taiwan calls an ongoing campaign of bullying by Beijing, using its massive military and economic power to isolate the island.
In a Washington Post op-ed published shortly after her arrival in Taipei, Pelosi writes, in the face of the Chinese Communist Party's accelerating aggression, Our congressional delegation's visit should be seen as an unequivocal statement that America stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom. That sentiment echoed by other U.S. officials Tuesday.
So for China to try to turn what is in the historical norm into a crisis, or to try to use it as a pretext for aggressive action around Taiwan, that's on them, and they would be the ones who'd be escalating.
Let's bring in CNN's correspondent Selena Wang from Beijing and Kylie Atwood from New York. Selena, let's start with you. As we mentioned, the Chinese spokesperson said that the country will now launch exercises and a series of targeted military operations around Taiwan in response to Pelosi's visit. But these drills do occur frequently. Is there concern that China could exploit this visit to further their strategic objectives, though?
Well, look, ultimately, when and if Beijing decides to make a more decisive move on Taiwan, that will depend on Beijing's own political calendar, their own calculations. They want to move when they think the timing is right. They wouldn't make that decision based on when a U.S. official goes to Taiwan. But there is a debate right now about what exactly does this trip accomplish? Could it actually encourage China to do more of the kind of political, economic, and diplomatic coercion that, ironically, Pelosi did not want to happen as a result of going to Taiwan? So this kind of fiery rhetoric, this fiery language as well, and the action we're seeing from Beijing, that is also as much directed at the audience at home as it is internationally. This is serving as a distraction for the leadership here. There are many problems at home, including an economy devastated by the zero COVID policy, snap lockdowns that continue, and we're seeing propaganda really whip up this kind of nationalistic, patriotic fervor around this visit by Pelosi, calling this a direct challenge to China's sovereignty, that there will be powerful reaction. And according to state media, we've recently learned that late on Tuesday night, China's Vice Foreign Minister Xie Feng actually urgently summoned the U.S. ambassador to China, telling him that the U.S. should have stopped Pelosi from going. They should have, quote, stopped her from acting recklessly. They've said that, accusing her that she's doing all of this just for her own political career. Now, this exacerbates a U.S.-China relationship that is already at the lowest point in decades. And the question is if that relationship can ever come back to this from this point, if there can be any sort of off-ramp. And even if we avoid conflict this time around, the other question is, does this put us in a closer place so that in the future conflict could happen more easily?
And Kylie, this isn't the first time a speaker has visited Taiwan. We last saw that in 1997. But despite the tension, potential provocation that Selena was just referring to, why would Pelosi believe that this is an important statement to make or trip to make?
Yeah, well, Bianna, a lot has obviously changed in 25 years, and it is because of those changes that House Speaker Pelosi felt like right now was an important time to make this visit. In that Washington Post editorial that you were discussing earlier that she penned and was rolled out just as she landed in Taiwan, she talked about the fact that China has grown increasingly aggressive, increasingly bellicose towards Taiwan. She said that they have done so in the airspace with these warplanes. She talked about their cyber attacks on Taiwan. She talked about squeezing them economically. And so basically what she was saying is that because China is doing these things, it's more important now than it ever has been to demonstrate U.S. support for Taiwan, for the island, to maintain that real partnership that the United States has with Taiwan. Now, of course, because of this bellicose rhetoric that we have seen from China and some of these actions that we have seen in recent hours as she landed on the island, that is what has concerned U.S. officials. Now, most of what we have seen up until this point doesn't seem like it has gone much further than some of the things that China has done in the past. And so that is what we'll be watching for over the course of the next day while Pelosi is there and meeting with Taiwanese officials. U.S. officials have warned China not to go too far, not to make this into a crisis. The Secretary of State said if they did that, that would be on China, and essentially it would be their fault and their fault only. So they're watching to see what China does next, if there is anything else to come here.
And Will, it's 5 a.m. now in Taiwan. What's Pelosi's expected agenda in the coming hours? And picking up on what Kylie was saying about cementing the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan, what exactly does Taiwan stand to gain from this potentially inflammatory visit?
Well, they stand to gain and they stand to lose in terms of they are gaining their, they're evolving their relationship with the United States. Nancy Pelosi, as second in line to the presidency, third most powerful person in United States politics, she now will be in the morning, starting around 8 a.m., meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen as well as members of parliament. And she'll be learning about how their young democracy functions and probably sharing stories. She was at Tiananmen Square when she was at the beginning of her political career. A lot of people in Taiwan are very interested, just from my own personal experience, to talk about that day, because this is the only Chinese-speaking nation that allows the discussion of what happened in Tiananmen Square. So Nancy Pelosi has a lot of things that I'm sure she's interested in seeing and talking about. She's going to be visiting some memorial sites during the day. She's also going to be speaking with business leaders as well, because obviously Taiwan is trying to tell the story of this island, not just in the framing of, a young democracy, a democracy that was born out of some of the people who are running the country today were meeting illegally in hotel rooms and were arrested and jailed for fighting for democracy. And now here they are still alive and in positions of power. And so there's a lot that Nancy Pelosi and her delegation can learn here, can take back with them to the United States, that the Taiwanese government hopes will help shape policy back in Washington. And then, of course, also there's the business side of things. Taiwan is the world's #1 semiconductor manufacturer. TSMC makes the chips that you have in probably several of your devices right now. And so Taiwan knows that if there was some disruption to the supply chain, it would have global ramifications. And they also want to make sure that U.S. lawmakers know that when they're making decisions about whether or not to come to Taiwan's aid if and when China were to make a move. One thing I just want to say about these military drills, Bianca, is that, yes, China's done this sort of thing in terms of the maneuvers before. We just need to watch very closely to see how close to the Taiwanese coast these are actually going to be taking place, because some of the maps that were released by Chinese state media show this potentially encroaching into Taiwan's territorial airspace. That's something we need to watch very carefully, because it could be, if that were to happen, a major provocation.
Absolutely. We know that you'll keep a close eye on that for us. Will Ripley in Taipei, Selena Wang in Beijing, and Kylie Atwood in New York. Thank you all. Now, the United States says that the Taliban could face consequences for harboring the leader of al-Qaeda, who was on the run for decades before he was hunted down and killed. We're now learning more about the meticulously planned U.S. operation to assassinate Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul. President Joe Biden calls it justice delivered for the victims of the September 11th attacks, saying the strike proves that the U.S. doesn't need boots on the ground in Afghanistan to conduct effective counter-terror operations. And yet, the assassination underscores a troubling point. After a US-led coalition spent 20 years and billions of dollars fighting to root out al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and their Taliban backers, it now appears that some Taliban members invited al-Qaeda's leader himself back into the heart of Kabul. Nick Payton-Walsh has more.
The target was the same as it was at the start of the war on terror. 9/11 mastermind turned al-Qaeda's 71-year-old leader. But the method startlingly precise. 2 missiles hitting Kabul's fanciest streets. The al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, stepping onto a balcony that had likely for years housed rich Westerners working for NATO, but stepping out onto it dawn Sunday for the last time.
I authorized a precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all.
The Biden administration, so confident they got the right guy, they built a model of the House. They said they didn't need boots on the ground before the strike or after.
We do not have DNA confirmation. We're not going to get that confirmation. And quite frankly, based on the multiple sources and methods that we have gathered the information from, we don't need it.
It was a staggering counter-terrorism success, born of a failure the US had tried to gloss over. As the US rushed to leave Afghanistan, at the end losing control at the close of its longest war, it had tried to suggest al-Qaeda were degraded, no longer a threat there. But in truth, the group were finding a safe haven there again, with concerns last year they might have been able to strike the West again as early as next year. They weren't the threat they were when Zawahiri masterminded savagery at the US Embassy in Nairobi or on the USS Cole. And their brutal star had been eclipsed by the mayhem of ISIS. But their franchises had spread across the world, often encouraging locals to target other locals, and Zawahiri remained their figurehead with his hands on some buttons. Analysts felt his recent messages suggested a man more at ease, even complacent. US officials saying they had followed family members to get him. His most likely successor, Saif al-Adil, recently in Iran, according to the UN. One former Afghan official telling me he may have recently left for Afghanistan. But terror leaders last less long these days. Still, the enduring, harder questions are for the Taliban. Few believed they had truly renounced terror like they promised the US. But after 20 years of war, they still brought exactly the same al-Qaeda figures back into the safest of their havens, central Kabul. Yet found the United States also had a long memory and now didn't even need to be there to kill their most wanted.
Fundamentally, the question really is not now whether this terror group, with its most impactful, awful years far behind it, manages to reconstitute itself into the threat that it once was, or get itself yet another leader. It's whether this strike permanently damages the possibility of ordinary Afghans getting aid into their country soon. Yes, it shows that the Taliban, whilst not governing in the way that they hoped they could because of sanctions, are also possibly slipping back into the worst aspects of providing safe haven for terrorists. That may make it extremely hard for the international community, or certainly the western parts of it, to think about putting aid into that country, exacerbate the tensions that are already there in those international relationships. And for ordinary Afghans struggling through this summer and the winter ahead, that could indeed prove deadly. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, New York.
Let's go live now to CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr. Barbara, how does the death of al-Zawahiri change al-Qaeda, if it does in any meaningful way? And should the US expect retaliation in response for this strike?
Well, how does it change al-Qaeda, Bianca, I think is absolutely the key question right now that analysts are looking at. The question is, what is al-Qaeda 20 years on after 9/11, after Osama bin Laden? Zawahiri had been in charge. Did he get the same pledge of allegiance that bin Laden had from al-Qaeda operatives around the world? Hard to tell that he got that same kind of respect, if you will. But look, al-Qaeda had morphed over the years. Certainly a safe haven in Afghanistan, possibly in Pakistan at times, but it had also been active in the Arabian Peninsula, in Yemen, though not so much in recent years. Growing activity in Africa, especially in Somalia, with its affiliate related organization, Al-Shabaab. So there had been a good deal of change in al-Qaeda, becoming much more regionally oriented, trying to be influential in the areas where it operated. The question now, I think analysts are looking at, is could al-Qaeda resurge at any point to the same point where it could once again pose a threat to the West, where it could get financing, organization, train and equip fighters, and plan and carry out another terror attack against U.S. interests or even against the homeland. Doesn't seem like that's likely right away, but down the road, that's what intelligence analysts are worrying about. Bianca?
Barbara Starr at the Pentagon for us. Thank you. The Biden administration has just approved what could be a multi-billion-dollar sale of weapons to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It comes after Mr. Biden met the leaders of both countries during his recent visit to Jeddah. The State Department says that the proposed sale, of which Congress has been notified, is worth an estimated $3 billion and includes Patriot guidance-enhanced missiles. Approval was given on the same day that the UN announced a 2-month extension of the truce in Yemen, where the Saudi-led coalition and Houthis have been engaged in a brutal conflict for years. Now, Brittney Griner goes back on trial in Russia. The US basketball star makes her first court appearance since we learned about a potential prisoner swap. We'll go to Moscow.
want this show, One World, to be a place where people watching from all corners of the globe can understand why what happens in Africa has a huge impact on all of our lives in ways we might never even know. Because of my background, I am well aware of the vibrancy of this continent, and I want to show that to the world. People of my continent do deserve to be heard. We are rich in ways beyond the soil beneath our feet.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
Nothing is ever given to you in life. If you want to be a great businessman, you got to put in the work. And the same applies to survivors of trafficking. My name is Given Kachepa, and I'm now a dentist in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Zambia. We grew up very poor. I was trafficked into the United States by an organization known as TTT Partners in Education. The mission of the organization was to go to African countries and bring kids to America to sing in churches. We were singing in malls. We were singing in schools. So the ministry had different ways of making revenue, and yet those of us that were singing were not receiving a penny from that. My dental practice is based here in North Dallas. We've been here now 5 years. It's been an exciting, wonderful journey. My goal as a dentist in the future is opening up clinics in Zambia. We have 2 of them that we've built from the ground up. And being a business person today, I just cannot foresee a situation in which I would work somebody without compensating them for the work that they're doing. It's important to me that we all try to get along and make life a little bit easier for each other.
American basketball star Brittney Griner returned to court on Tuesday. She's detained in Russia on drug possession charges. This was her first court appearance since we learned that the White House was offering to exchange a Russian arms dealer for her and another US citizen. If convicted, Griner could face 10 years in prison. She's set to make another appearance in court later this week. CNN senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen is standing by for us. Fred, Russia has criticized the US, saying, quote, megaphone diplomacy won't work. Is Washington's strategy with Moscow going to backfire, maybe, on Griner and Whelan?
Yeah, well, the Russians certainly do seem somewhat irritated by the fact that the U.S. Made public what they call a substantial offer for not only Brittney Griner, but of course Paul Whelan as well. And in fact saying that they are accusing the U.S. of megaphone diplomacy. Of course, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, last Friday told Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, that he believes that they needed to return to quiet diplomacy. So it's unclear whether or not those negotiations are making substantial progress or whether they're going on at all. But we do know, Bianca, that they certainly do loom also over Brittney Griner's trial. I was able to speak to her defense lawyer today, and the defense lawyer told me that Brittney Griner is obviously very focused on her own defense. On the last couple of days, this trial is going to take place, but she is also aware of the fact that this negotiations and the talk of these negotiations are out there. Let's listen in. Tell me how Brittney is doing now ahead of this court date, because she said she's a bit nervous but also quite focused. Is that correct?
She's still focused and she's still nervous, and she still knows that the end is near. And of course she heard the news, so she's hoping that sometime she could be coming home, and we hope too.
And that same lawyer also told me that she believes that in this trial there needs to be a verdict, she thinks, before a prisoner swap could happen. Now, having said that, the trial is moving forward at a very fast pace. Today, the defense called its final witness. It was an expert witness to sort of try to cast some doubt in some of the early forensics that were done on those vaping cartridges that Brittney Griner has admitted to having carried with her when she entered Sheremetyevo Airport near Moscow on February 17th. It was very interesting because the lawyer said that in this next trial day, which is going to happen on Thursday, that's when the closing arguments happen. She also said that a verdict could happen on that day as well, but it's not 100% clear that that is actually going to be the case, Bianca.
Fred Pleitgen for us in Moscow. Thank you very much. Now let's take a look at key stories making headlines from Russia's war in Ukraine. 5 foreigners who fought with Ukrainian forces in Mariupol are facing trial in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, the Russian-backed separatist region. The Croat, Swede and 3 Britons are accused of being foreign mercenaries. But the UK and Ukraine condemned the sentences, saying that they violate international law. Russia says it has taken over 6 settlements in the Donetsk region, including an area with the, quote, largest thermal power plant in Europe. Ukraine says that Russia has made limited gains in the region, but that they have been able to fight off its advances around the key city of Bakhmut. The first shipment of Ukrainian grain to leave the country since the Russian invasion has arrived in Turkey. The ship anchored in the Istanbul port late Tuesday after being delayed by bad weather. It's carrying 27,000 tons of corn. After inspection, it'll head to Lebanon. The impact of the war on Ukraine is being keenly felt in Bulgaria, where inflation is soaring and there are issues around energy supply after Russia cut off direct gas exports. A new caretaker government has now been sworn in, one that's promising to tackle these issues as a priority. The government will stay in charge until new elections, which are set for October. The Bulgarian Prime Minister says there's not a moment to lose.
Today is the inauguration of the 100th government of the Republic of Bulgaria. The 100th government is not going to have 100 days of tolerance. The difficult task is to search for solutions to the inherited crises that fall on us, without having the mechanisms of a working National Assembly and Parliament.
Thank you for watching. That was The Global Brief. World Sports is up next.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Paula Newton in Ottawa, and this is CNN.
On World Sport Today, we're in conversation with one of England's triumphant lionesses. Alessia Russo tells us how it feels to be a European champion and why she thinks that iconic back-heeled goal will probably never happen again. And last year's Europa League finalists Rangers could be going out of the Champions League before it's even really begun. They're on the ropes against a team you've probably never heard of. Hello there and welcome to World Sport. We're coming to you from CNN Centre. I'm Don Riddell. The England women's football team are still basking in the glow of their European Championship win against Germany at Wembley on Sunday. And they now have another big game to look forward to. Assuming England are able to secure qualification to next year's World Cup in their September matches, they will then play host to the reigning world champions, the USA, at Wembley in October. And it's a game that both teams are very excited about. England is a passionate football nation which had been starved of success for so long. The players, therefore, who helped England to their first ever major women's trophy will probably find that their lives will never be the same again. They are already in high demand, with interview requests and media opportunities piling up fast. World Sport's Amanda Davies got in at the front of the queue, and on Tuesday she caught up with one of the Lioness stars, Alessia Russo, who recalled what it was like to play in such an historic match.
The final was just an unbelievable day. The stadium, the event, having all those fans there was just surreal. And then for women's football, we hope that it's the start of what's to come.
What was the moment for you that when it really hit you, this is the European Championship final?
I think, well, I didn't shed any tears until after the game, but before, when we were all singing the national anthem and 90,000 people are singing it with you, was a real, like, wow, like, this is crazy how far it's all come.
What did Serena said to you before you went out onto the pitch?
She's very calm and level-headed, that she manages to keep us all, like, not numb to it all, because obviously enjoy the occasion, but you can't play up to anything really. You've just got to focus on the game. So she's really good at keeping everyone locked in and focused. So it was just the same as normal.
How would you describe her as a coach?
I think the main word to describe her is that she's a winner. She knows how to win and she has her ways and it works. I think we all love playing under her. She's like keeping us all humble, keeping us all on the ground, and was a real driving force to why we were able to kind of just focus on the games and not get too involved in everything else.
When the final whistle went, what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, unbelievable. That's when I was a bit emotional. I think just like, it was a bit of relief almost, because we'd been working so hard for it for the past like few months now, and obviously the players that had played before us had come so close for many years. So yeah, they paved the way for us, and then we could just go out there and enjoy it.
Have you genuinely not felt the pressure, or how have you dealt with that?
Honestly, no, not really. I think the media put pressure on us as soon as they found out it was a home tournament, but
I'm sorry.
There's never been any pressure kind of internally. People were asking us once we beat Norway, are we ready for the final? And we were all thinking we've still got like 3 games to get there first. In camp it was really results focused, and we knew there would be no trophy or no final if we didn't win the game that was first.
Is that even the case after the back heel?
I watched it a couple times, but then that was it. I had to switch off, and because it was a turnaround before the final, and I thought, right, it was amazing and it was very special, but yeah, it would have meant nothing if we didn't win the tournament.
Had you practiced that?
No, and I don't think I'll ever score a goal like that again. I think it was just a one-time wonder, but I'll take it.
Have you read some of the things that have been written about it, that, you know, when you've got the likes of Tchouaméni recreating it on the pitch? I mean, how does that feel?
Yeah, that was really cool. I saw my old club that I grew up playing with, they were all practicing it at training, which was nice. And if it's a goal or whatever, it's nice to see that women's football's leading a mark on the world and on young boys and girls. So yeah, if it's inspired one person to go out and play football, then I'll take it.
There's obviously been mega strides with the game here in England, but also across Europe in recent years. Do you think the US is still the benchmark?
I think historically, yes. What they've done over the years is unbelievable, but they've also won trophies to back it up, and hopefully that's what we're going to be starting to do. This is just the start now for us, I think. Yeah, we want to pack out stadiums every week, of course we do, but yeah, we've got to be realistic, and we know that it's a process to get there, and we just want to see more people fall in love with the game and accept that women's football is amazing, and yeah, the USA set the bar, but the teams are catching up now, and it's really exciting.
Can you give them a run for their money at the World Cup next year, do you think?
Hopefully, yeah. We'll give it our best go, yeah. We're excited.
You can tell she's still on cloud nine. That's England's Alessia Russo with Amanda Davis. Still ahead, the Women's British Open golf tournament is going to tee off at Muirfield in Scotland this week, and that is something you definitely would not have predicted just 6 years ago. Next on World Sport, I'll tell you why.
Being a diver, there's so much they can do to protect the ocean and save the ocean. If you look at the ocean out there, okay, there's some net that's drifting in the water. Could be much bigger than the size of any boat out there, okay? So imagine a net being drifting, okay? It can drift from days, months, years, until they get removed.
It's no longer catching fish for people, but sadly, it is still catching fish, and very often wildlife, like turtles and dolphins and seabirds.
A couple of times I almost got killed being tangled.
Got it! You found it?
No, I'm holding it. I'm holding it. It's heavy. Age is only a figure, okay? There's so much we can do, no matter how old you are.
There is nowhere in Lysychansk that's safe.
Let me show you what this scene looks like. It's absolutely obliterated.
The force of that blast blowing out windows.
President Putin has been sending this message. He can hit this country anywhere, anytime.
Farmers are still working, even with the threat of Russian artillery that can land here.
Ukraine's message, please send more weapons.
Welcome back. It is the final major tournament of the women's golf season this weekend, and the top 3 players in the world will all get a really good look at each other over the first 2 rounds of the Women's British Open at Muirfield. World number 1, Jin Young Ko from South Korea will tee off at 12:38 p.m. That's lunchtime locally on Thursday. She's in a box office group with Australia's Minjee Lee and America's Nelly Korda. Lee has won 2 majors in the last 12 months, while Korda has had 4 top 10s in 5 tournaments since returning from emergency surgery on a blood clot in her arm. You know, we cannot possibly overstate the importance of the top women playing at this famous old golf course in Scotland, which has become infamous for its misogyny. Previously, our partners at Golf Digest have branded Muirfield, quote, quite possibly the rudest club in the world. As recently as 2016, their membership voted against the admission of women to the club, and the backlash was so immediate and so severe that they were forced to vote again and change course. And now, just 6 years later, the world's top female golfers will play a major tournament there.
I've heard a lot about Muirfield. I know the guys that played here over the years, so I think it's an amazing opportunity for us to have Muirfield added to our open rotation. It's pretty cool seeing the pictures. I've been looking forward to this week for a long time.
I was extremely excited to come out and play this event this year. I knew the history and the fact that we were going to be the first female tournament out here too was pretty amazing.
To be playing better golf courses and golf courses with this historical meaning as Muirfield, and it hosts so many men's championships, but the first women, and then I think to be playing this year, it really means a lot to all of us, and it's just proof that the women's game is continuing to grow and the purse sizes increase, and we're on network TV more, and we're playing these better venues, and like I said, it's just a really fun time to be a part of women's golf because it is growing so much, and we feel like we're making a difference for the future generations.
Action starts on Thursday. We'll keep you up to date here on World Sport. Now then, last season, Glasgow Rangers played in the Europa League final, and if they'd beaten Frankfurt in that game, then they would have been lining up in the group stage of the Champions League this season. They lost the game, though, and now they're having to qualify for Europe's top competition. And right now, they are really up against it. On Tuesday, Rangers played in the third round first leg against Royal Union Saint-Gilloise, and they were beaten 2-0 by the Belgian side. This was a huge day for Saint-Gilloise, who haven't played a European game since 1964. A goal in each half means that they're now heading to Ibrox for the second leg in a very strong position. Coming up on World Sport, what next for women's football? We're in conversation with a football media executive who says that some of England's European champions should soon be among the highest paid footballers in the country.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
Welcome back. In recent years, women's football has been steadily growing in popularity around the world. In the United States and Europe in particular, it now feels as though the game is at the threshold of a brand new era. The product is obviously compelling on the field and the fans are ready to eat it up. All it needs is major interest from the commercial sector and more airtime from the broadcasters. England is still buzzing after their Lionesses beat Germany in the European Championship final on Sunday, and interest in the whole tournament broke records. While some might be surprised by that, football insiders are not. Tom Thirlwall is the CEO of the football media company Copper 90. Earlier on our show, he told Alex Thomas what he thinks should happen next.
It was a major watershed moment in '92 when the Premier League was formed, and it felt like a kind of new kind of vision and attitude and spirit was sort of flowing across English football. Exactly the same, for my mind, needs to happen with the WSL. I think it needs to have its own, vision and have set its own commercial future with people that really know what they're doing in terms of being able to maximise the value that we know will now be created. It's a generational opportunity, and people should be looking at this over the next sort of 25 years, really, to maximise that potential.
I was at the parade, the celebration at Trafalgar Square on Monday. You could see the goodwill from all sections of English society, all those fans that have suddenly seen their new heroines and been inspired by them. From a Copa90 perspective, because you have such a great link with the voice of the fan, was Euro 2022 that game changer that we've been told?
I think it absolutely was. We saw a big difference this year versus the World Cup in 2019. I think your point about it, a real cross-section of fans were there on Sunday. There's been some lazy tropes around the women's game is great for families and kids. Yes, of course it is. But it is also appealing to a whole cross-section of society. I think 44% of people in an FT article this morning were saying that they are now more interested in women's football as a result of the Lionesses' wins. And we've got to get rid of those sort of lazy tropes and, you know, start to engage fans, you know, across the entire spectrum of football.
And are you just paying compliments to women's football, or is it genuinely marketable? Because you're all about the stories we see in football.
Yeah.
And I was struck by some of the personalities on stage. You could kind of imagine the men's players doing that, but not in the same way. I mean, you know, when you saw someone, you know, like Rachel Daly absolutely steal the show with her impromptu karaoke.
Yeah.
It was something sort of new and unique and fresh about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been said, you know, from the camp and from the players themselves, and you can see it that, you know, this is a brilliant group of players and personalities. I think we should all be looking for players like Alessia Russo to be some of the highest paid athletes in this country over the next 2 or 3 years. She's an absolute superstar that has delivered on the pitch. Plays for Manchester United, one of the, you know, sort of, you know, global brands in football, has just won a European Championship. And we should be absolutely setting those ambitions for all of these players, as well as looking at some of the issues that need to be addressed from a grassroots perspective. And there's significant issues at that end of the game as well.
Kelly Smith talks about the corporates stepping up. Is big business interested in women's football?
Yes, it absolutely is. I spent a long time talking to some of the sort of biggest stakeholders in terms of sort of brands up to 2 hours after the final whistle on Sunday. I think that at a C-suite level, these big brands need to adopt a different stance.
What do you mean by C-suite level?
I think that there's a lot of pressure from sort of marketing departments and people that are close to the game. But I think that at C-suite level, at CEO, you know, chairman, chairperson level in the business, major brands and major business need to look at this not as a sort of calendarized return on investment. This is a generational investment about fighting inequality, about creating a fairer world. And it's not about, did we get a return on the investment at the end of this year based on us supporting, you know, the Women's Euros or the Women's World Cup in 2019 or 2023?
That's really interesting, because I did get a little sense yesterday of some defensiveness about those that have been in it for the last decade or more, saying, we have been fighting the fight, you guys are now turning up.
Yeah.
Can you understand that? And is that the kind of the reason why companies would do well to get in now, so they can say we've been in it?
Absolutely. And to echo something Alex Scott said, you know, the train's leaving the station and picking up speed. We've been having conversations over the last 5 or 6 years to encourage and engage major brands and businesses, you know, on that train journey. And there's been a lot of hopping on and hopping off. We saw that after the World Cup in 2019. WSL was obviously, you know, cancelled during COVID and came back sort of after, you know, the men's game. And so there's been a lot of stopping and starting. There's been a lot of hopping on and off that train, and we need now consistency. We also need the major stakeholders in the game of football to empty their pockets and put some money on the table, from government to associations to clubs. This will happen as a result of, you know, a coalition of effort to continue this momentum. Because, as I say, from the elite level right the way down to the grassroots level, support is needed across what we see as the greatest innovation in football. A whole new audience is waiting for what comes next as a result of what the Lionesses did on Sunday.
Fascinating conversation there with Tom Thirlwell of Copper 90 and Alex Thomas. Okay, some people are calling it the biggest ever trade in Major League Baseball. Why Soto's move to San Diego is anything but so-so. That's next.
I believe we have an opportunity to move towards hope because we are learning more about this criminal enterprise. My name is Lisa C. Williams. I'm a philanthropist and an advocate for survivors of human trafficking. When I look back over 22 years of when I first started working in this space, I was simply trying to find safe shelter for girls who were 10 and 11 years old who were being bought and sold on our streets. One of the things that I remember very vividly, it was a turning point in our fight for Rachel's Law, is the CNN special, Children for Sale. It took something like that documentary that was hosted by Jada Pinkett Smith to wake up people and for them to want to look at it and understand what we were saying to them. And that just gave us momentum. And we took that film and we took it all over Georgia and we galvanized people around a movement that we call the I Am Rachel movement to tell them about the safe harbor law that we were trying to get passed. And 83% of Georgians said, we agree that children are children and not the criminals.
Hello again. It has been an incredible summer for women's sport, dominating the headlines across the globe in various competitions. And the Nigerian sprint hurdler Tobi Amusan is certainly a part of that big success story. She won gold recently at the World Athletics Championships in Oregon, setting a new world record in the process. She's been telling CNN's Zain Asher all about it.
My coach will always tell me every time I step on the track, the goal is to win. So, you know, going to the championship, the goal was to win each round and definitely make it to the podium. But, you know, the center of the podium was the plan and, you know, we executed that pretty good with the help of God.
Just talk to us about, you know, what was it like sort of telling your family that you wanted to be an athlete? I come from a Nigerian family myself, so I know, I can only imagine what that conversation, how that conversation would have gone. But from what I understand and what I've read about you, your mother was very supportive about your dreams to become an athlete. Your father was not supportive. In fact, he was so not supportive that he actually one day, this is what I read, you tell me if it's true, he apparently burned your sports gear because he wanted you to focus on your studies. A, is that true? And B, if it is, now that you are a world championship title holder, now that you are a gold medalist, now that you have broken the world record, is your father now on board?
Actually, I'm trying to change that narrative of he doesn't want me to do track. I'm one stubborn kid. You know, I was too invested in, you know, running track than actually going to school. Okay. So it was like, you got to choose one. I'm like, I choose sport. And I was like, well, not in this house.
Wow. So he did actually burn your sports gear.